topic that comes up. Yeah, is it okay? I've asked the Indaba Action Team if they're comfortable if we record the presentation, so to speak. Anyone else on the Zoom, are you comfortable with that? We'll turn off the recording when we get into discussion afterwards, just to make sure everyone feels comfortable being totally open. But okay, I don't see anyone. You could say it in the chat if you're uncomfortable. So we are recording. And yes, let's get rolling, and let's have Denise and Ace, our equity coaches who facilitate these meetings, can do a quick introduction. I'm Lynn Stoddard, the Executive Director of Sustainable CT. Torin, do you want to do a quick hello?
Morning, folks. Torin Radiccioni here, Program Assistant for Sustainable CT. Thank you for joining us today.
Okay, and yeah, Ace, how about we start with you?
Yep, Ace Ricker, equity coach, second year with Sustainable CT, an advocate and educator for the last 20 plus years. Excited to listen in.
And Denise Page, also equity coach with Sustainable Connecticut, founder of Ubuntu Storytellers Ideal, which is an anti-racist group that is founded in storytelling of personal narrative by people who identify as Black and Brown ancestry. So I'm delighted to be here tonight, and I'm delighted to introduce our guests. And I think it's quite fitting that Mary Harrison has not had a chance to introduce herself to people in the group who don't know her. And so now that we have guests, I think it's appropriate that we start with Mary. Would you like to introduce yourself, Mary? And I want to say to all of you, thank you for taking the time to do this morning. Thank you for that. Mary, floor is yours.
Thanks. So I'm Mary Harrison, and I'm a retired teacher. I taught in New Haven for 33 years. And during my time in New Haven, I was very, very, very aware of the inequities in education, and particularly in the schools where I taught, which were primarily marginalized communities. So when I retired, it became my focus to make a difference and do what I could to impact change. And as a result of that desire, Indaba was born. Denise Page and I are co-founders of Indaba. It was born out of a desire to provide an opportunity for the Shoreline community to explore topics related to race and racism. And before I go any further, Denise, are we ready for us to just move on, or did you want to do something else first?
Well, I do know that the rest of the Indabians have not had an opportunity to introduce themselves to our guests. I know Tanaya, am I saying that correctly? But we welcome you. I don't know if you're unmuting or traveling, but we welcome you to the conversation. And when opportunity presents.
Okay, I'm sorry. It took me a minute to unmute. I'm so sorry.
That's quite okay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tanea. I work at Nonprofit Accountability Group, and I'm based in Hartford. And Artie, thank you so much for sharing. It's great.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So yeah, so I think we can just give the background of Indaba. I think very briefly. I think I'm just going to say this is my bias. What I'm most excited about is what you all are doing, what you did with the experience you had, and how you're bringing that forward. So anyone that would like to speak to that?
Denise,
and as you do, you can introduce yourselves as you do. Mary?
if it's okay, I'd love to have our folks introduce themselves, and we have just a quick introduction to Indaba so the group understands what it is.
Good. So that's what I was asking for. So great, you're ready to do that. So do you want to lead that, Mary?
Yes, and then you want each person to introduce themselves as they speak? Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, however you all planned it.
Yep. Okay. Yep.
So Indaba was born out of this desire to have conversation on the shoreline about race and racism. And as a result, a series of 8 sessions were designed to help participants answer the question, but what can I do about racism? And the workshop was named Indaba. And the word Indaba is from the Zulu and Xhosa languages, which means a council to discuss a very important topic. The first workshop series was held in the fall of 2021. And since then, there has been another cohort of the Indaba workshop series. And currently there are 25 people who have completed it. Just the tiniest little bit about the workshop. The Indaba workshop series was designed to help us see where our own core beliefs, words, and actions are aligned and where they need adjusting. Learning together and teaching one another to live in alignment as an intimate, supportive community is the goal of Indaba. And after they have completed the Indaba workshop series and have answered the question, but what can I do about racism? The participants in the workshop series have become the Indaba Action Team, and Lori and Nancy and Bob are parts of the Indaba Action Team, and they can share with you each what Indaba meant to them, what the impact was, and then also they'll share with you what Indaba is doing now, which is exciting.
Fabulous. Thank you, Mary.
So I'll start, and then just quickly about our own, we asked our own little reflection on the training. There's so much there, it's hard to get it in one sentence, but I had retired right before 2020 and the crash of the COVID hit us all, with the hope that I would find a community with which to continue the work that I've been doing pretty much all my life around equity and social justice. For 25 years, I was with an organization called the William Casper Graustein Memorial Fund, and we focused on education and equity, and I was the public policy and communications person there. So when I heard Denise, I've known Denise from that work and others, and I met Mary when they started this up. I thought this is a godsend. It is a community, and it turned out to be even more of a community than I hoped, who are all focused on doing what we can as largely a white community along the shoreline. So I will stop there. Bob.
Thank you, Nancy.
I'm Bob Lyons, resident of Guilford, member of the first cohort as well. My journey, if I can call it that, along the way has started with involvement with a white men's group online in Seattle, led by a white man coach. And the title of that was Understanding Whiteness, Men in Conversation. And learning a lot in that conversations with other like-minded white men about the principles of white supremacy. We went over that quite a lot. Res Romanek and his work did have a Black facilitator joined as well. And so that was all online during COVID. And when Indaba suddenly appeared, I thought, well, this is an in-person opportunity. Signed up and showed up to the first, I think, in-person meeting after the pandemic that I had attended, and noticed that there wasn't another white male in the group, and was feeling a little uncomfortable at first as to have I found myself at the right place, and hung in there. Having known Denise for a little bit, that helped, and so stayed on and noticed that there is an absence of white men in this. Cohort 2, I believe, had 2 or 3 white men. So picking up some momentum, Denise, if you have, and Mary, if you have a cohort 3, you might even have 5 or 6 white men. That would be a good sign. So this, my participation in Indaba has been educational for me in a way. Certainly awareness building on my part, especially the topic of microaggressions and all those very subtle things that we learned that can offend, that can hurt, and do harm. So education and awareness have been my primary takeaways, and now the involvement in other activities with this group. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Bob. And yes, indeed, your species identity is increasing as we go forth. So thanks. I think as others come out unscathed, it sends a signal to others it may be a safe place. Thank you. Lori.
Yeah, I'm Lori King, and I'm a retired educator. I worked with elementary children for about 39 years. And I too, like Mary, share that idea of seeing the inequity in the schools, because I worked in a variety of schools, but when I retired, I did some consulting. So I was consulting in New Haven and the Bronx and Harlem, and really that was probably one of my biggest eye-opening experiences because of the inequity I saw, and it really upset me because I look at the communities here along the shoreline where I was substitute teaching, where they had 15 kids in a class and they had every bell and whistle you can imagine. And then I go to Harlem and there's a kindergarten class with 32 kids. And yeah, I've struggled with that. So this is something I've kind of all my life really spent time thinking about, reading about. But when Indaba came along, I was excited about it, but I was also a little bit, I went in with some trepidation because I had done a few different kinds of things where people were confrontational and they would confront you and they'd say, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean? What you're really saying is poverty or Black people or something. So I'd been in some sessions where I really felt frightened, and I didn't feel brave at all after being confronted. So I went in a little bit uneasy about all of it. But as it evolved, I became braver. I could get over my embarrassment for the way my dad would talk about people of color, or my mom, the things my mom would say about people of color. And I talked about it out loud and shared it with people of color. And that's not easy. It's just not easy. And I think it was very, very powerful work. And I have loved the work with Indaba, and people know that one of the things I like to say about myself is I'm kind of like a dog with a bone. When there's something that really I think is important, it's hard to get me off of it. And I've been a push, I've been a force, and I know I've offended, and I know I've bugged people, but that's my style. And Mary, I'd like to just share a little bit. We had a member, Anderson Curtis. I don't know if any of you, I know the Indaba people know Anderson. He works in the ACLU office, but he came to Indaba, and he's a Black man, and he has had his ups and downs in life, but he came to Indaba and he sent Mary this note kind of reflecting on Indaba, and I thought it might be nice to share a thought from one of our members who was a person of color. And he saw.
Excuse me, 1 second.
Yep.
I'm sure you already did this. Is there permission from Anderson to share it? Good.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yep, I've been in touch with him.
I figured as much.
Yep, absolutely. And he kind of came into Indaba thinking this would be a chance for him to mobilize us, right? To get us working in the social justice work that he's involved in. But what he said surprised him, I guess, was how much the work in Indaba uncovered his own pain. It uncovered the racism that he's dealt with all of his life, institutionally. And he said Indaba created that brave space for him, and he just felt joyful. about the experience in Indaba. And Anderson's a pretty neat guy. And he's been through a lot. And I certainly cherish his friendship. So that's
Thank-
it.
Oh, Larry, thank you so much for sharing that, and thank all of you for sharing, because one thing that I think is of value to our guests is that I hear each of you saying that while you had an interest, and while you maybe even had a passion, and while you had a commitment, walking into this space doesn't mean that it's easy just because you care. And that you might feel moments of, am I in the right place? And is this a safe place for me? But by staying in that space and being open, and I'm gonna assume that the opening was gradual, you opened more and more in that space, but what the payoff is. And I think it's important for people to understand that when we do go on these kinds of journeys of self-reflection, because this is from my premise, that's really where the work begins. We have to know who we are and how we are and how we are formed to be able to move into another space, to be an ally or an advocate for anyone else. And that's what all of you so bravely and courageously did. And Lori, thank God, you are very much like a dog with a bone, and I'm so grateful for your stick-to-itiveness. And I can say the same for Nancy and Robert. So before I ask the next question, which is about what you've done since and what you're doing this week, which is so exciting. I didn't know, Ace, if you wanted to, did you have anything you wanted to share, to weigh in, feedback?
No, I think I'm good for now. I know near the end, I'm fully ears wide open to what's going on, and we'll chat at the end.
Wonderful.
Oh.
Okay. So
Denise,
did you?
we actually
Yes.
have a little agenda that we put together.
Good. I was just going to ask that. Thank
Oh,
you.
we weren't going to all talk over each other, and we hopefully won't repeat too much.
Okay, so roll.
So my job is to sort of answer the question, well, after this training, what do we do now? That was the question we left with. And Denise and Mary did their darndest to make sure we were prepared for the next step. But I had to say, I think for me, it felt like, falling off a cliff is maybe a downward motion. I want to say more like, jumping onto an airplane, but only hanging on to the tail of it, So we had some very good and serious conversations after the training ended. And what I think two things that we really focused on was, one, we wanted to keep learning ourselves. And two, that we wanted to reach out to the community. I mean, we weren't doing it just for ourselves, but how do we engage the community? And we came up with this idea about, it's called RACE, Conversations Among the Curious. And we always counted ourselves as among the curious. We were learners along with the people we invited in to have these conversations. We structured them there by using a TED Talk as a kind of opener. And we had one that was just among friends and family to see how it would flow. And after that, we had 5 more. Just to give you an idea what they were, we had one that was a TED Talk by Titus Kaphar called "Can Art Amend History?" The questions that came out of there, I don't know if anybody knows the artist, but he's a Black artist in New Haven and elsewhere, but who does this amazing TED Talk about erasure. And the kinds of questions that came up are where are our own blind spots, and have we felt erased, and what did that feel like? So it was very provocative. Another one was called "The Danger of a Single Story," a talk by, and excuse me for my stumbling on this, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Is that close? You can tell me later. But it's a wonderful TED Talk, and the reflections on that one are about stories matter. and that stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair the broken dignity. Another one was by Heather McGee called Racism Has a Cost for Everyone. And that started bringing people into, this is not about being victims but it is about the cost of white people, people of color, men, women. We feel it differently, but really get honest about what is the cost. I guess the fifth was the Deconstructing Racism, One Headline at a Time, which was a TED Talk by Baratunde Thurston, and really got on to the idea about the effect of media on what we think of as the truth, and got into headlines and how they can make things feel, safe for some people and really unsafe for other people. And the whole thing got to a conversation about how do we make different choices when we read things? How do we see things differently and make different choices? And then the last one we did was a Verna Myers talk about how to overcome our biases, walk boldly toward them. And there was a good conversation about how do we be bold in what we're doing. It's good to be open, and it's good to be gentle, not just with ourselves, but with our audience and with others. But how can we also be bold? So those were well attended. After that, probably about a year and a half's worth of conversations there, we decided we needed to pause and then reflect on what we had learned and figure out what was the next step for this group. How could we go deeper? How could we go farther? There was cohort 2 was coming to the end of their session. How do we work together with that cohort? All of these questions piled up. And I think Bob is going to talk about next, somehow about the next step after those conversations. Just to say that we probably had, I haven't counted it up, but over 200 people participate in those conversations over time. So, and they were at the library in Madison and the community center in Guilford. So, Bob, if I missed anything,
Thank you, Nancy. Yeah.
Thanks, Nancy. Where the cohort 1 was kind of moving into the pause, as Nancy said, cohort 2 was finishing up. And so there was a meeting that the 2 cohorts had up at North Madison Congregational Church. And we started talking about, well, do we remain as 2 different cohorts and do our own thing? Do we come together and work together? What do we want to do? And so we're in this, we have decided to come together, and we decided the 2 cohorts, 25 people strong, will be together. And so other meetings then have taken place since, and there's a governance process underway of defining mission, vision, an elevator speech, which I'm not directly involved in, but Nancy is. So some of the governance cornerstones maybe, and a steering committee has been formed to work on those various matters, and there's an events committee, which I'll get to in a couple of minutes. But I think this is somewhat of a perilous time for organizations like this in this stage. We've got a lot of momentum we carry into it, and now we have this kind of pause. And how will we emerge from this pause? And that's that is, I think, where some organizations continue, some don't. Some pick up additional momentum and speed. And so forming ourselves, maybe patterning ourselves after others, which is what Lori's going to talk about in just a moment, but taking clues from others as to their journeys will be helpful in charting the course for us. And so we're kind of in this in-between state right now of getting ourselves organized from a governance standpoint, and we'll take it from there. So Lori, I guess I pass it to you at this point.
Okay. were you gonna talk about the play at all, Bob, or is
I
that
will
later on?
after you. I'll talk
Okay,
about it after you.
okay. So what I was gonna talk about was kind of where we're going with this idea of
Reaching out.
reaching out. So one of the things I've discovered is there are a lot of people doing this work. There are lots of groups, there are lots of just little, this is probably an overused expression, but a lot of people working in silos. So I don't believe in reinventing a wheel. If there's something that's good out there, let's jump on board. So one of the first things I did was with another group was I attended something with Code, CODE, up in Hebron, and they had brought in Deborah Irving, who wrote the book Waking Up White, which was one of the first books I read, and great book. So I was so excited. I think Mary, you shared it with me that she was coming. So Mary and I ended up going to her talk, which was sort of a workshop thing for about 3 or 4 hours. And it was fantastic. And I learned so much from her because she really taught us about all of the things that have led to the systemic racism we see today. She explained redlining in a deeper way than I've ever heard it explained. She went through all of the things that white leadership has done over the years to keep, our Black citizens suppressed. So, 400 years later, we're still just working so hard on this issue. So when I saw what Code was doing, I got really excited. And of course, I'm thinking, well, we got something good going here in Indaba. And so then as we started looking at that, we decided it's important for us to reach out to other groups, to find opportunities to maybe even just once or twice a year have a get together with all of these groups sharing ideas. And Code was very excited about that. And they do have a yearly meeting they're going to start including Indaba on. So I'm kind of trying hard to find these different organizations and bring us together more. Another one would be Witness Stones, trying to get more involved with them. There's one in Guilford called ABAR, Anti-Bias, Anti-Racist. I've reached out to them. Trying to look at our flyer here of all these things. Our different human rights committees in our towns. And of course, with our latest project, Bob will talk about, but we've gotten involved with some of the arts, the different art organizations. And I just think that art, whether it's visual art or, performance art, is such a beautiful way, and storytelling, to bring this to the community. So I'm really hoping, and we've recently written an application for a program that would provide some funding. So we're hoping that we'll get the funding, and we'd like to then plan a retreat and invite people doing this work. So that's kind of where we're at with our plans down the road.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you so much for that. Like Bob, you have an addendum to where you
Yes,
are?
the event itself, the long awaited, here it is at the end of our little presentation. I know a man in New Haven, a Black man. I've known him for several years. He's very creative. He's a playwright. And I had attended a play that he had written. Actually, it was a stage reading that he had written and was performed by 4 Black men in New Haven at Long Wharf Theater one evening. And then he took it down to New York City off Broadway. And I thought, well, this play, which now is a play, it's the readings have been, all the lines have been committed to memory, and so this is acted out, is a play with 4 Black men who speak of the struggle, pain, suffering, trials, trauma that Black men in general, not them personally necessarily, but Black men in general, are experience as they grow up, in effect, as they live and grow up and live in this white dominant culture. And it's my viewing of the stage reading was very, very powerful, very visceral reaction to it, emotional, extremely revealing and vulnerable were the actors, in terms of giving the audience a glimpse of the pain, of the struggle, that they and others have experienced along the way in life experience. So I suggested that maybe this would be something we could bring to that Indaba could bring to the Shoreline, and I was met with an immediate enthusiasm. And so we're off to the races with this. And I contacted my friend, the playwright, and one thing has led to another, and we're going to present this now. Indaba is sponsoring and presenting this Death by a Thousand Cuts, Requiem for Black and Brown Men at the Clinton Andrews Memorial Town Hall Theater, 400 seats with a stage, quite an impressive venue, to say, for a town hall, certainly very, very unusual for a town hall. And April 13, this will go on the stage in front of an audience of more than 200 that have reserved so far. We hope to fill the theater even more in the coming week to act this out. The process itself has led us as a non-501c3 to find a fiscal sponsor. So the Arts Council of Greater New Haven offered to be our fiscal sponsor. Sustainable came along and they put us in touch with Patronicity. Patronicity helped design a crowdfunding site. We were given a target goal of a certain number, 75 donors, to leave some donation of any size on the Patronicity site. We're up, I think we're over 90 now. So we've cleared that 75 donor threshold, which then enables Sustainable Connecticut then to provide a match for the budget for this particular play. And we have crowdsourced $7,500 already ourselves as well. And that comprises then covers the $15,000 budget. Along the way, we talked with and received endorsements from arts organizations, as been stated, also from community government organizations, the Clinton Human Rights Committee, and I've sat in front of the Guilford Human Rights Commission 3 different times to try to push this through, and ultimately has been given thumbs up by the Board of Selectmen in Guilford. And earlier this week on Monday, I was in the office of the First Selectman of Madison talking with her. Too late for Madison really to get involved at this stage, but having a nice conversation with her about the sustainable support that we've received, and indeed about the play itself. So this is kind of open doorways, I think, into spaces where I have not typically been, and maybe others have not either. Some degree of struggle in some cases, some open reception in others, but the arts community certainly has been very supportive of this. And so we're very pleased to put it on, and we look to have a full house on Saturday, April 13, and feel very good about this when we're finished.
Thank you all. I'm wondering if everyone can just join in a virtual round of applause for the work that's being done and the courage and the commitment being brought to it. So Mary, I'm going to pass the baton to you in a moment, but there are a few things I wanted to share, and I don't want to step on your toes. I don't know if you had anything prepared. So what I would like our guests to know about Indaba, besides all that you've just discovered about their character and their being, is Indaba was formed with the intent that at the end of this very intensive training, there'd be a whopping $1,000 with which to do a project that they agreed on. Now, I think Mary will agree with me. We were thinking a project, like you might bring a Black author to R.J. Julia's and and buy some of her books to give to the community or host a multicultural dinner event or something like that. What this group has done, what these human beings have done, what these individuals have done is so much more than we ever envisioned. The fact that they have moved forward and are looking to become a group that sustains and makes a difference, that's one of the unique differences to be celebrated about this group. It wasn't a one and done. The second thing is, so much of this work, I find, this is my bias, is steeped in knowing. Now I know more. My awareness is increased. And often that's the end of it. And those that know me know I use the Weight Watchers analogy, which I won't do, but one can know and still be significantly overweight. So knowing is where we have to start. We have to become aware of what it is that we don't know and increase our awareness and do the self-reflection, all of that. And then often groups move to, and now we want others to know. And that's wonderful. The end goal is to coalesce a body of people who work to dismantle the systems of racism, to address their own personal practices, and in the workplace to address and challenge policies that might be in place. And I share that because I think that that's the relevant part for those of you in communities who are engaged in this work, that's really the way that justice and equity is served is because as our awareness and our knowledge increases, and I am the daughter of an English teacher, I'm going to say this anyway, it's not just what we know, it's not just what we do, but it's who we be. And I think Indabians are such an incredible example of taking that knowing and catapulting it into being different individually, being different collectively, and then making a difference in the larger community by doing. And so that's the uniqueness that warms my heart, that I also hope serves as motivations for your communities as you go forward with this work. So I'll stop and pass the baton to Mary if you wanted to add anything or anyone else. But thank you all for doing the work that you do and joining us today, and for our guests as well. I don't know if our guests may have questions, but Mary, I see you're up.
Oh, thanks. No,
Mhm.
I just have to say that I have been so impressed by not only Nancy, Lori, and Bob, but every single individual who participated in the workshop has left and is doing something significant, either in their own community individually, which we have many who are doing that, in their own families individually. We have many people who are doing that. And then to have a group, the Indaba Action Team, come together on a regular basis to produce things for the community and really make a change in the community is just heart-stopping.
All I can think of to say to that is ashe. That's what comes to mind for me.
It's really true. And Nancy and Lori and Bob have been just in the middle of this from the beginning and continue. And it takes so much stamina and support within the community. When one person is feeling like, oh, this is too much, the others come around, and that's growing. And I'm just so really incredibly grateful to see all this develop. So thank you, Sustainable Connecticut, for all that you've done to help us grow, because through the project that we're doing currently, we have grown in an enormous way. Our community has really gelled and is pulling the best out of each of the members to put on this play. And without your support, we could not have done it. We are so I am personally grateful because as long as it's been since the first Indaba cohort finished their work and started the community conversations, people have been saying to me, is there a website? Is there a website? And all I could say was, there should be. That I don't do that well, but because of this program and because of your support, we now have a website, and we are forming in a way that would not have happened without all of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And I do want to echo the appreciation to Sustainable Connecticut for even for allowing this platform today and all the work prior to that. Thank you.
And I want to
And
thank,
I'm sorry.
I just want to thank Sustainable Connecticut too, because I reached out to you guys and I had no idea what you were really about. And you've been wonderful. You held our hand all along the way with this process, and it's been wonderful. And we couldn't have done it without Sustainable Connecticut.
Well, we're thrilled to support
you.
this through our community match fund, and it's money that is available to any person or nonprofit or town employee or community-based organization in any registered town in Connecticut. So yeah, as I told you yesterday or Wednesday when we were preparing for today, once you finish this after April 13th and the show is over, the door's open for you to come back in with other ideas that we can support for events or conversations or outreach in your community. I love the idea of joining with the code group and similar groups in other towns. Maybe there's something we can help support around that. Would be fabulous. But yes, we're really excited to be able to support. So happy to open it up now, and we can stop recording if if people would like or not.
I know for me, and thank you for sharing your different experiences. It's something that I very much so try to engage in. I know I've worked with Mary as well in different ways, and have found growing up in I was adopted and was born in Huntington, Connecticut, was one of 3 people of color in my school growing up. Both my parents are white. And navigating conversations very differently, very young, and how I move through the communities in that regard, and being able to really have the conversations is something oftentimes we are uncomfortable having those conversations, but very happy to see that the conversations are happening, because oftentimes when that line of uncomfortableness starts building in this this is something that makes me a little questioning, and starts this mental backing up, in a sense, that oftentimes the conversation gets shut off. And especially for an individual who has navigated a lot of these conversations with peers and with white individuals, it's sometimes difficult to, as a person of color, have the conversations and not have the individual feel that I'm trying to throw something at them to make them feel a certain way. And I do very much so appreciate bringing this event that's coming on April 13th and being vocal, because I see all of you as allies in really saying hey, these biases are here, and these inequities are here, and we are not looking to speak over this community, but speak with and make sure that they are being heard. And I applaud all of you very much so, because I don't feel in any way you are screaming over anybody and the community, but very much so assisting in who's at this table, because we need to really make sure that everyone is, and you are doing that. And so I really appreciate that. And I just am very excited about hearing more about this, because I've heard bits and pieces, and excited to break down some silos. And if I can assist in breaking those silos down, like you were saying, Lori, I'm very happy to do so.